I was sharing like what the government is getting ready to come out with, and they have this thing called a food compass. And the food
Yes.
compass takes in over 8,000 foods they've tested, and they give them a score from 0 to 100. The higher the number, the healthier the food is. So they certify it as healthy if it meets certain guidelines. And if it's green, or not green, but yellow, if it's in the yellow area, then there's more caution. Don't eat a lot of it, but moderation's king. And if it's red, then you may want to cut back because this is not helping you. And 5 out of 7 days a week, I eat a food or a couple foods that are in the red based on what the government says is unhealthy. And that's when I pan fry my eggs in butter.
Right.
So according to the government, I'm killing myself.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that is so crazy. If you
Yeah.
so that's why, okay, this is why I like talking about the trans fat story.
Okay.
The reason I like talking about the trans fat story is because it's a big part of our history. And if you don't know our history, you are doomed to repeat it, right?
Right.
So trans fatty acids, as of June 18, 2018, have been removed from the food supply. Now, they were introduced in 1911 with Procter & Gamble's Crisco, but they really got pushed into the food supply in a big way in the 60s, 70s, and it just has been continuously going up as far as the trans fats. And trans fats, what happened, like, for instance, when a food gets okay to be introduced to the food supply, they're supposed to have some due diligence where they check the toxicity of the food. They do their investigations, make sure if it's new. But what happened with trans fats is that they knew that trans fats are naturally occurring. So trans fats, if you ate steak or if you had pork, there's a natural amount of trans fats in a lot of these ruminants, these types of foods. So they said, okay, well, if we're already kind of eating it, then there should be no problem. And that's kind of how it bypassed all of the screenings. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay. I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I found that I was always curious to how did they just introduce a new food into the food supply without, I mean, did they study it? Did they do, what I mean? Was it evidence-based? And it wasn't. It was just assumed. So the reason why I bring that up, and I would love your thoughts on this, are the trans fats and knowing our history, is that we now know that trans fats that we were eating on a regular basis, because it saved companies money, it made it where food could sit on the shelves for longer. On average, just in the United States, 50,000 people died prematurely every year because of these trans fats. And then there's one gentleman named Fred Kummerow, who was a scientist in his own right, and he argued from the 60s all the way up into 2009 when he sued the FDA and sued them to ban trans fats from the food supply. And he won. And in 2015, the judgment was in. Trans fats are killing us. They're bad. On average, 50,000 people die every year. Let's ban it. And we're going to give you, manufacturers who make these foods and cupcakes and all the food that has trans fats put into them as an ingredient. You have 3 years, Susie, to get rid of it, which means another 150,000 people will die.
Yeah, let's let people keep dying for another 3 years.
So if the government knew this and they continued to allow it to be in our food supply, again, history is repeating itself when it comes to the seed oils.
Definitely.
I mean, how long do we keep eating it before people or the government is forced to force these companies to remove it from the food supply.